Next on the agenda is a discussion on a English-only ordinance. And we have Mr. Tim Burke from our attorney's office, and I believe we're going to hear from Commissioner Shoemaker.
Yeah, and if I could, I'd ask Suzanne Bibby to come down. Suzanne, why don't you identify yourself, if you would, please?
Sure. I just have a pretty short written statement. Do you want me to give that? Or?
Well, yeah, just go ahead and tell us who you are first. And
Okay. My name is Suzanne Bibby. I'm the Director of Government Relations for ProEnglish. We're a 501c3 grassroots lobbying organization. We're based in Arlington, Virginia, and our main mission is to make English the official language at all levels of government, so local, state, and federal.
And you came up from Virginia or someplace, right?
Yeah, we're right in Roslyn, so
Okay.
right across from D.C.
All right.
Yep.
Well, I guess I'll kick this thing off, Mr. President, with a little bit of overview as to what's prompted my placement of this item on the agenda. Yeah, this isn't a radical notion, this English as the official language, by any stretch of the imagination. 31 states across the United States, and if my math's right, that's like 62%. Right? 62% of the states have already acted to make English their official language. 2 counties in Maryland thus far, Queen Anne's and Frederick County. And it's Frederick County's ordinance, which passed earlier this year by a 4-to-1 vote, that I believe Tim has patterned this proposed ordinance against. Isn't that right, Tim?
That's right.
Okay. So in addition, this type of legislation I can submit to you. I don't know if you're going to address this or not, Suzanne, but it certainly enjoys considerable popular support nationally. There was a Harris poll done earlier this year, said that it enjoyed 88% support nationally. And what's interesting about that was like 96% of Republicans and like 80% of Democrats and 83% of Hispanics support making English the official language by way of legislation. So, I mean, I found that to be very intriguing. Now, to talk about this particular ordinance, what it does, I think I've mentioned a couple things that it doesn't do. For one thing, it's not an English-only ordinance, and I know you'll touch on that, I'm sure, to explain the distinction, because I heard some of that coming up in public comment a while ago, English only, and it's not English only. It doesn't single out any segment of the population. It merely says that for purposes of Carroll County government, English is its official language. It doesn't preclude individuals or the private sector, for that matter, to use any language that they want, whether if they want to use Farsi or Swahili or Aramaic or whatever it is that they want to use, have at it. And it doesn't in any way preclude the rendering of emergency services to folks who can't speak English. That's not going to happen. And some folks said, well, what's prompted this? I mean, after all, given the county's demographics, given it currently, it's not really an issue here presently. Well, that's true to some extent, but I think sometimes it's better to be proactive than reactive. And Carroll County's action may have some precedential value, I think, in encouraging other counties in our state to follow our lead, in the lead of Frederick County and Queen Anne's County and 31 states throughout our nation. The other thing I think that's prompted this belief that it may be time to act is that throughout our nation's history, America's been the great melting pot, and we've had wave after wave of immigrants come to America, and wave after wave of immigrants have assimilated under one language. And I believe that assimilation as a people has made us stronger. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we are the world's leading superpower. I don't think and there's anecdotal evidence of it just about everywhere you look, that this assimilation is something that's happening frequently enough these days. And I think that's a little bit disturbing. And I think, it may have, and probably will have, tremendously deleterious economic impact on us going forward. So really, to the notion that this ordinance promotes the notion of assimilation, and also, I think, has the potential to save Carroll County some substantial cost in not being required to provide publications and services and such in languages other than English. I think that given those considerations, and you can touch on what I've missed, Suzanne, but those considerations make today, right for passage of this type of ordinance, and that's why I've asked that it be put on the agenda.
All right.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and you really touched on most of the points. But I'll try to
Stole
read
all
this
her
quickly.
material.
I'm sorry.
She drove all the way up here.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But yes, the main point is that it's not English only. That's really kind of an opposition phrase that they use, so it sounds like we're eradicating every foreign language from being spoken in the county, and that's not the case. But thank you for the opportunity to speak today in favor of making English the official language of government in Carroll County, Maryland. My name is Suzanne Bibby, and I'm the Director of Government Relations at ProEnglish, a national English language advocacy organization based in Arlington, Virginia. ProEnglish was founded in 1993 with the mission to preserve English as the common unifying language of our nation by making it the official language of all levels of government, local, state, and federal. ProEnglish is submitting this testimony on behalf of our Maryland members and over 100,000 active online grassroots in all 50 states. The English language is one of the most durable ties that unite us as Americans. The founders of our nation recognized this, which is why President George Washington in 1795 signed a law passed by Congress requiring existing and future federal statutes of the United States to be published solely in English. More recently, state and municipal governments around the country have taken the initiative to pass laws and ordinances recognizing English as their official language. 31 states, about 62% of them, have adopted laws making English the official language of government. Unfortunately, Maryland is not one of those states, but in February of this year, Frederick County, Maryland became the first official English county in the state. Queen Anne's County followed that lead shortly after and adopted an identical official English ordinance in May. In May 2010, a Rasmussen Reports poll found that 87% of likely voters support making English the official language of the United States. That same survey also found that support for official English remains high across all demographic groups, and that voters reject by sizable margins the idea that official English is racist or a violation of free speech. Over 80% of whites, blacks, and those of other racial and ethnic backgrounds agree that requiring people to speak English is not a form of racism or bigotry. Official English legislation often presents many questions about its meaning and intent. An official English ordinance for Carroll County would simply make English the default language of county government operations and communications. So if the Board of County Commissioners passes this proposed ordinance, which mirrors that of Frederick, it will enable the county to more effectively enforce the policy, and it will be more likely to survive a legal attack if someone were to challenge it, and it has been challenged in the past. Contrary to what opponents claim, official English does not mean English only. Establishing English as the official language of the county means that for the county to act officially or with legal authority, it must communicate in English. It means that the language of record is English and that no one has a right to demand taxpayer-funded translation services or documents in any other language. It also means that unless the government has a compelling public interest for using another language, like in the case of public safety or something like that, it will use the official language alone. The Board of Commissioners can feel confident that the proposed ordinance is in keeping with the U.S. Constitution, as we currently have 31 states with official English laws, none of which are facing legal challenges. A more recent victory for official English took place in 2006 when the ACLU filed a complaint in federal court challenging an official English ordinance adopted by the city of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. ProEnglish had helped Hazleton draft its amended English ordinance. Subsequently, we helped the city write its initial brief in response to the ACLU complaint, and after reviewing them, the ACLU dropped its complaint against the English ordinance, and the ProEnglish rewrote their ordinance, which was initially very simple. It said English is the official language of the city, and we wrote it basically to reflect the language that you're considering right now, and they withdrew their complaint. So this victory really indicates that similar city ordinances and laws are likely to withstand legal attack. Carroll County residents have great reasons to support making English the official language. First, making English the official language of the county would reaffirm the melting pot ideal. Government has played an important role in encouraging the assimilation of new immigrants by communicating with them in English. But today, instead of encouraging immigrants and their children to learn English, many government agencies at all levels of government are making it their policy to communicate with non-English speaking residents in their native languages. And these kinds of policies represent a total reversal of the melting pot tradition. Contrary to what opponents claim, official English laws do not send an unwelcoming message to immigrants. Rather, they convey the message that there are responsibilities as well as rewards that accompany the privilege of immigration to the United States and the choice to make Carroll County one's home. Official English laws also do not dissuade foreign companies from doing business in those states or counties. This is a common opposition claim. Foreign corporations don't base multi-billion-dollar decisions on whether state or county governments publish their documents and their websites in a common language, English. Instead, they really are motivated by things like access to markets, tax rates, other incentives, transportation infrastructure, and availability of an English-skilled workforce.
Yeah, it doesn't appear that Frederick County has suffered any economic harm next door to us from their enactment of this particular piece of legislation.
Right. And you can bet that any state or county or a small city in the United States that if there was someone who thought that they were in some way harmed by it, you would be hearing about it and there would be a lawsuit. And there hasn't been. Second, making English the official language would provide a powerful incentive for new immigrants to learn English. On the surface, it may seem like the compassionate thing to do by removing incentives to achieve English fluency only harms immigrants. English is a language of success in the United States, and census data prove that those who speak English earn, on average, 2 to 3 times as much as those who don't. And finally, making English the official language here, it would stop or prevent, if you're not already providing translation services, it would stop or prevent county taxpayers from having to subsidize those services. So it would be costly, divisive, and impractical for the county to communicate in all languages, where 303 languages are spoken in the United States, but it would also be inherently unfair to operate in only some of them. ProEnglish believes that the current system where some foreign languages are accommodated and others are not is discriminatory. And the only way to make it non-discriminatory is for the county government to communicate in one unifying language, English. So we think that this ordinance is a good thing for the county, just for its money-saving features, and also for really restoring, the incentives to learn English and removing, hurdles to do that by always having, translations available. So on behalf of our Maryland members, we respectfully urge you to pass the ordinance and to approve that it be introduced today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Now, Ms. Bibby, I think it was Winston Churchill, in describing the relationship between the United States and Great Britain, that said we were 2 countries separated by a common language. How do we define English as it relates to changes in the language, how it evolves, what obligations are we taking on by virtue of this action? And what is the standard for what English is, as silly as that sounds to probably ask?
The standard for what English is?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Okay, well, is there a particular dictionary that is the standard for English? Is there a particular resource that's for instance, how does the word nunya relate to, which is a slang term, relate to the English language? What is our guide as a government for what is an acceptable English phrase or word or colloquialism?
That might be a legal question.
Well, if Mr. Burke wants to weigh in, I'd be happy to have him. I mean, there are words that were not words 20 years ago because of the evolution of technology. There are words that are, like I said, sort of slang acceptance of the language. What is the standard? I mean, if we're setting a standard, there needs to be a standard to look to, doesn't there?
I would say the use of the common language is understood by everyone as the English language in the United States. And it would have to be updated periodically. As you say, new words are entered into the dictionary. But I think there's a general understanding and a common sense understanding of what the English language is in the United States.
I think so.
I think you mean talking about different dialects, essentially.
Well, I think our language is replete with and enriched by having taken on words from other languages, but they're languages, but they're words. They're not the whole.
I understand, but some of them are derivatives.
Language.
Okay, but some of them are derivatives, and actually not even derivatives. Some of them are simply words from other languages that become incorporated into the English language. So my question is there not a standard by which that you refer? Is it Webster's dictionary? Is there honestly not a standard that we don't write laws without standards to them, do we?
Yes, apparently.
Well, when Mr. Howard is done, I'd like to make some comments.
Well, no, it's a question.
I think it's self-evident.
I am not opposed necessarily to the concept. I want to make sure I understand what obligation we're taking on and if we're setting a standard.
I would say the reasonable man doctrine would apply.
Is that what we apply generally? Wait a minute. Is that generally what we apply as a board here? Because it seems to me we parse words to the nth degree to make sure that they can't be misconstrued or misused.
But
And
they're words in English, though. You're not using a different language.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no standard by what the English language is other than that which is commonly accepted.
That would be my definition.
So we're creating a law that says that the language as it's commonly accepted is what now we've adopted.
Suzanne, have you seen in any of these statutes that have been adopted by any of these 31 states or Hazleton, Pennsylvania, or Queen Anne's, or Frederick County? Have you seen any definition as to what English is?
No.
I didn't think so.
May I ask, how does that
So are we, wait a
Yes,
minute, but because I don't mean this in a facetious way. I want to make sure I really understand the obligations we're taking on here. Well, how does it relate to using correct English versus incorrect English in the materials we put out? Is there a grammatic standard that's incorporated into this?
No, it's just the English language. So, I mean, if you were to publish, a pamphlet about, how to stay safe during a tornado warning or something like that, and you wanted to, produce that into different languages, the English language version, if there was a mistake on it, that's not a violation of the official English law. If there was a sentence that had incorrect punctuation or possibly had spelling errors, that's not a violation of the official English law.
And what about words that change in meaning over some period of time? I mean, certainly there are things that mean one thing and then their meaning changes. Is that not something that we have any? I mean, for instance, howdy. Is howdy an English word? Is that an actual word, or is that a phrase, or is that a? I want to make sure that we're just not being cavalier about what it means to speak English. I hear a lot of things spoken that I would not consider particularly good English.
Well, whether English is the official language or not, all of our ordinances are written in English, so we have that issue anyway.
Well, and
right?
from a legal standpoint, we have Black's Law Dictionary, if there's a point of question.
So is the ordinance going to reflect that that's the standard we're implementing? This board has historically not been vague in the way we do things and the way we treat language and words. I just want to make sure I understand what we're being asked to do, that's all. I'm not trying to be contrary.
I'm proposing an ordinance that apparently has, has already been implemented in 2 other counties in Maryland and has passed constitutional muster. That's what I'm trying to do.
I'm not suggesting it's not constitutional. I'm suggesting I just want to make sure I understand what we're taking on. But
Tim, would the reasonable man doctrine apply? Would the reasonable man would interpret to be English?
I think the English language is what it is. It exists as we know it. It's something that everyone understands to be what the English language is.
Okay.
Maybe that sentence wasn't, but
No, and again, I want to make it absolutely clear. I mean, I think it's almost a sad state of affairs that this is one of those things, and we've had other issues like this come up, where we have to define something that you almost can't even believe you have to define. I'm not against the concept at all, necessarily. I just want to make sure I understand the technical aspects of what we're doing. How does this relate to things, or is this at our discretion, if we have some sort of celebration or some sort of multicultural activity or some sort of, how does it relate to that?
that's one of your exceptions in there. It doesn't prohibit you from participating in a festival or issuing a proclamation to a particular group that would be in a
Or
language other
teaching
than English.
classes or
Teaching
anything.
classes.
Okay.
Okay. I want to make a few comments because I've had a lot of citizens send me emails and we've had some testimony. I want to tell the citizens something about me personally, and I probably applies to the other commissioners. I love Italian food. I mean, I love it. I love Indian food. I love Mexican food. I love Thai food. I love Chinese food and many, many other types of cuisine. And I thank God that America has all these diverse cultures, because if we didn't have all those diverse cultures and we weren't another, we wouldn't have all these richness to draw from. It would be a very dry place if all we had were hamburgers, hot dogs, and steaks. So bringing this down to ground level, even an average citizen can see how our lives are enriched by having multiple cultures. But I become very troubled when I get calls from the media that try to equate the establishment of English as a common language as some form of xenophobia. I believe that's the right word.
It is.
Fear of foreign culture. That is simply not legitimate. The concept of official languages is not something new. I mean, first off, at the world level, English is the de facto official language of business. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in aviation, I believe it's a requirement to be a pilot anywhere in the world. You have to speak English because it is the official language of airports all over the country.
All over the country or
All over the world, excuse me, all over the world. Now, one of the things that comes up, and you alluded to it, Suzanne, is this idea of America, and we've always considered ourselves a melting pot. Now we hear people using a new metaphor of a salad bowl. Is America a melting pot or a salad bowl? And I'm not going to get into making a judgment as to whether we should be a salad bowl or a melting pot, but I will say this: when we were a melting pot, it seemed like we had more unity and cohesiveness. It meant that people came to America and they became Americans. And under the new multicultural doctrine, it advocates something different. I'm not rendering a value judgment here, but what it says is come to America, but don't become an American. Be your own culture who happens to live in America. And there is a mixed set of positives and negatives associated with becoming a salad bowl rather than a melting pot. But one thing we know is a fact, or I believe this to be a fact, and I will say that, I believe this to be a fact, is that when you have a common language in a country, it promotes national unity. It creates equality of opportunity in business. It prevents the factionalization of society. And it promotes equal opportunity for all. So going back again to something Suzanne said, this board welcomes people of all national origins and languages to Carroll County. But I firmly believe, as Suzanne said, that with rights come responsibilities. And if any group of individuals, regardless of their national origin, wants to come to Carroll County, to the state of Maryland, to the United States, they're welcome, but they have the responsibility to learn our language so that we have the unity of being one people and not a factionalized set of different people living separately within the same country. So I will be supporting this motion by
And all I'm
Commissioner
seeking to do at this juncture, Mr. President, is introduce this. So I would move to introduce it at this point.
I don't think you have to move, but take a motion to introduce.
The action we're talking about taking, though, is to send this to a public hearing.
Yeah.
That would be and this would be the actual language of the ordinance as it stands right now. Okay. So that's a motion. You want to make a motion
Yes,
to send
so
it to
moved.
public hearing? All right. Do we have a second? All right. In terms of actions and activities that we're conducting right now, is there anything that we know of, as it stands right now, and what we're doing in government that we will not be doing as a result of if the ordinance passes?
I don't think you'll see any changes as a result of this ordinance.
Okay. And so, and as an ordinance, this is something that a future Board of Commissioners would have just the same level of ability, obviously, to countermand if that's what they chose to do.
Yes, and I would emphasize it's regulating your conduct. It's not an attempt to regulate any member of the public's conduct.
Okay, so
It's
does
how
that-
you. That's why it's important that it's referred to as an official English ordinance,
So
not
to-
an English only.
Okay, so to go to some of the points that were made, the issue of, for example, how a business conducts business, what they choose to do in terms of communication with their employees, what they choose to do with their advertising, anything like that, none of that is a factor in terms of what this relates to. This is simply about how we communicate.
How you as a government communicate, yes.
Okay. And we communicate with one language. And I do acknowledge, I mean, I think it's an excellent point, the notion that I've never understood when certain government entities put things out in some languages, how they choose which languages are adequate enough to warrant the investment of the community. You go to some places and they have, some things in English and Spanish, some have them in 6 or 7 languages, some have them in considerably more. I've never understood from a fairness standpoint how that exists. I would concur with my colleagues. I do think it's incredibly essential. We talk about celebrating America, we talk about core values and those kinds of things. I agree wholeheartedly that this is a reflection of this whole notion of how we do come together as a country and how we do use our resources in the fairest and best way possible. And so my frustrations with the English language and the lack of a standard notwithstanding, I think my concerns are satisfied at this moment.
Well, I think I've demonstrated again and again that I'm continuously frustrated with the English language.
Well, I'd say with someone that has stretched the English language to its reasonable bounds, I think it's almost interesting this came from the far right. But
I want to say one other thing. I talked to one attorney posted a comment. I think it was on the patch, Kim, and local attorney who's well respected, and she said, "Can you give us one concrete reason why in Carroll County today we should consider making English the official language?" Well, I was approached by another attorney last night at a social event, and he told me an interesting story that I'm going to share with you. Apparently some other government jurisdiction in the area was approached by a citizen that presented a lengthy petition, I think it had to do with planning and zoning, written in Armenian. And there was nobody in the county office building that could translate it. And a question arose, well, who's responsible for translating Armenian? Should it be the citizen or should it be the government? Well, there was no official language, so after going in circles, they discovered that it was going to have to be the county. The county would have to do this at taxpayers' expense, but then they had another problem, and that was trying to find somebody who could translate Armenian legalese into English legalese, and that was a very scarce resource. So ultimately, weeks ensued, and at great expense, the county went through in order to perform this translation. So the attorney said to me, "So, Commissioner, if you're asking me for his opinion," he said, "well, you definitely need an official language to prevent this kind of situation from developing, because in those cases it can be very time-consuming and very expensive for government to perform a translation."
I want to confirm that this is in no way a shift in our thinking or a message to the Board of Education or any other organization that we are discouraging the learning or the use of foreign languages in curriculum or anything like that, correct?
That's an exception in the statute.
I understand it's an
so-
exception, but I also want to make sure it's a message we're not
Well,
sending.
there's no question.
I mean that is an
I mean,
integral part of the educational curriculum, and in a world economy, I think it's incredibly important that we're not sending the message that we think that's a bad idea. The question I also have is, I think if we're going to do this, if we're going to go forward, it is incumbent upon this board to make sure we are adequately funding programs designed for folks to learn English. And we have some of those programs in the community, don't we, Mr. Powell?
Yes, we do.
Because if we're saying this is the standard, and this is where we want you to be, we should be encouraging and supporting that, and really, frankly, put our money where our mouth is if this is that important to us.
I agree.
Okay. Other thoughts or questions?
I'd just like to say, spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. And knowing multiple languages is wonderful. But a very interesting value question arises, and that's when immigrants come to America, is the burden incumbent on Americans to learn their language, or is the burden incumbent on them to learn the language of America? And I would argue it's the latter.
Well, no, I think philosophically it makes a lot of sense. I just want to just make sure. Now, as it relates to moving forward with the ordinance and the hearings, I think it is particularly important, and I don't mean this in any sort of a lighthearted way whatsoever, that we have the means by which to have hearings, and probably more than one, not just during the daytime, in the middle of the day, and that we find a way, and use maybe as one of our exceptions, the means by which to communicate in some alternative language if we feel like that's an important factor, so that people are heard on this issue. If we're gonna open this up to a real discussion. So, if historically we would have done that, I don't know if we would have or not. But
we haven't to date.
Well, then at the very least, I think we should make an effort to reach out to organizations that we think may have an interest in weighing in on it. And we have certainly done that on a number of topics. This is not something I think we should do without good public input. If it's that important, it's that important to do right.
I think this is the most televised event this board has been engaged in the last 18 months, and the most media-covered event that we've been engaged in. It's on every media source that I can find on the internet, so I'm sure it'll be well attended.
Well, and I hope we're doing this because it's important and not because it's a media event.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Do we have a motion? Do we already have a first and a second?
Yes, you have a first and a
All right.
second.
Any other questions or
And
discussion?
the motion is to send this to public
To have a public hearing. Yep.
Yeah, it's for introduction to send a public hearing.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
all the way
Thanks
up.
for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, we already did that.
We got more.
All right, next we have adoption and approval of minutes.